I'm going to be talking a little bit about history, touch on a little bit of history of Unity and also the Emotions Anonymous. And then I'm going to talk about maybe how I've benefited over the years. This is 40 years. I'm still practicing in both, in a sense. Anyway, it's interesting to know that Charles was born in St. Claude, Minnesota, 1854. And he was born on an Indian reserve, would you believe? 1854. A little bit of trivia. And it was near St. Claude, and it's not that far from here. In fact, Motions Anonymous, its headquarters is Minneapolis. So there's something about Minneapolis or that part of the world that seems to attract new thought, thinking or whatever. And they studied under a lady by the name of Hopkins. Her name is Curtis Hopkins. And another one was Mary Baker Eddy. Now that was the Christian Science that started way back then. And that's roughly when Unity started. And I think what really gave Unity kind of a boost and publicity is that Myrtle had tuberculosis. And she recovered. This is 1880s, remember. And tuberculosis in the 1880s was a severe thing. But apparently, she healed herself of this tuberculosis. And that made a bit of a splash. And it sort of they got a bit of a reputation for that sort of thing. And also, Charles had a sort of a dislocated leg. And they say that, and he had sort of a metal pin or whatever, but he was able to eventually walk like a normal person. So there's a couple of little miracles that happened in the early days, and they got a name for themselves. And of course, they've generated all kinds of literature. We have Daily Word, we've got, which I read consistently, and there's all the magazine, all kinds. They got into the business of publishing. And this is a worldwide movement. Unity is a worldwide, it's everywhere, as is Emotions Anonymous. These are both worldwide operations. It's not just a small situation. This is worldwide. And and there's all kinds of little, and the other thing they even have is a prayer line. You know, some of you might remember that there's even a prayer line. You can phone Unity and they'll give you a prayer. And that's a bit novel too. So they did a lot of interesting original thinking way back in his day. And he was very high energy, and once he got into this spirituality business, he really dug into it. And it's more about the spirit rather than the letter of the Bible and everything. So Unity is not a literalist religion at all. It's more to do with spirit and so forth. Headquartered in Kansas. I was there in 2007. Sandy and I went down there in 2007. And I came back with the idea of music ministry. I thought that music can make a real difference in a little church. And I believe it to this day. And I actually think singing is praying, and having a piano and everything along those lines makes a big difference. And so in the old building, I was, and Craig and a number of us were involved, and Judith were also involved in the music aspect. And so I still maintain music's a very important thing to any kind of a church organ, especially if they're involved, singing and so forth. Okay, so Unity came to Winnipeg about the 1920s, as I recall. So it's been here over 100 years. And there's always been some sort of might be a study group or something, but it's always been around since 1920 in some way, shape, or form. Emotions Anonymous. What's interesting about Emotions Anonymous is a guy by the name of Emmett Fox. And before AA developed their own literature, they used the writings of Emmett Fox, would you believe? And I have this little book here. I have many. I have about 40 Unity books. And I can say I probably read all 40 of them. And I still dip into them quite frequently. And so in the 30s, that's when Bill W. and Dr. Bob came along. They were looking for literature. They used his initially before they got their own literature. And this is how I often say the 12 steps were kind of married in a sense, way back in about the 1930s with AA and Unity. So they dovetail very much with each other. I've noticed that too, even in their readings sometimes. I say, but did Unity get that from the Emotions Anonymous literature or vice versa? Because they're very close in many respects. Okay. I came to Unity in 1984. In 1984, I was hospitalized. I was diagnosed way back as a manic depressive in the late 60s. I was hospitalized, well, I don't know, maybe 5 times altogether in that period as a manic depressive. I'd have highs and this sort of thing. And so I've had some hardships. I often say my son was poisoned, just like I was. I ended up being poisoned by 18 pounds of lithium, and my son died as a consequence of too much anesthesia, we believe, the day he was operated on for crossed eyes. So that kind of gives you a bit of a background of why I got involved way back in that time. And so the medical profession has struck out twice with me, but they did well with the transplant. My transplant is still operating 2006, and I'm feeling very fine. So I throw a little bit of personal story into this, maybe to help you understand why I do what I do. And I know that Reverend Johnson, she liked Emmett Fox. She said he was the best. And I sort of think I like him too a great deal. And one of the things that I think makes a difference with him is that he wrote the God's Hour concept. And it's quite universal. Brian Tracy talks about it. A lot of people talk. Really, it's step 11. It's about prayer meditation. And if I have enough light here, I'm going to read part of it. God's Hour. God's Hour is the most important event of the day. It might be 30 minutes, it might be an hour, it might be longer. And he maintains that we need this every day. He says it's the single most important thing is God's Hour, or step 11. In my case, I often go with Eric Butler's 10 minutes. He calls it the 10 golden minutes. Well, if I'm really in a hurry, I'll find 10 minutes. And and it goes on and on here. But then so God's Hour need not be held at the same time every day, although it is helpful if this can be done. This essential thing is that God's Hour is the single most important event in the 24-hour period, and that everything else is second to it. That's how strongly he felt about prayer and meditation and God's Hour. So just thought I'd mention that. And, okay. It's kind of interesting. I've probably had more experience with psychiatrists than all you people combined. With pill pushers and talking doctors. I know that for a fact. And one day I showed Dr. Mikoyevsky, he was my hero. He finally weaned me off that powerful poisonous drug, but it's too late. But I showed him the Daily Word one time, and I showed him Emotions Anonymous, and he read both. And he says, I like Emotions Anonymous better. But anyway, just a little 2 cents. But he was definitely a hero in my life. So I often think that 12 steps is kind of a light lunch therapy. There's probably nobody here in this room that's been to a 12-step meeting of any kind. Oh, really? Good.
Not for alcoholism, but for
Yeah.
wounded inner child, codependency,
Well, sure.
that kind of stuff.
And so he thought it was better than Unity, just the Daily Word, looking at the Daily Word and everything. And it is different. We have a sharing circle and everything. We have a topic, and we go around, and there's no crosstalk. You listen, you talk, and everything, and then at the end we go for coffee. We have kind of a little coffee break, and afterwards, and so it's a bit of a coffee clutch. I kind of like that aspect of it. And so I don't know if I can give you a full 20 minutes here, but anyway, what about the lessons learned? What would I say are the most important things I've learned through Unity? I think probably what the first one would be, know what you're about, and know what you're for, as opposed to against. So often we're against this or we're against that or everything, but this came from the Sister Teresa. She says, no, you got to know what you're for. Put it in your language, and get away from this. I'm against this, or I don't like that, or whatever. And you can turn it around if you just simply say, I'm for this.
It makes it so much more positive.
Yes, it's a much better energy. And so that's one thing to say it. It's another thing to do it. But so rather than criticize somebody, I would simply say, I'm for blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? It's a very different energy.
Yeah.
And I really like that concept of Sister Teresa's. I even learned about criticism. We've all faced with criticism in our lives. And in Unity, one of the lessons I heard is when somebody criticizes you, you say, tell me more. But oftentimes, if the person's angry, I forget to say that. But it works. Tell me more. Because oftentimes, he's got the problem, not you. And so in other words, don't take it personally. But it's an interesting concept to challenge somebody that's criticizing, I find. Tell me more. And see what they say. They'll run out of steam eventually. So I just thought that was pretty darn unique when I heard that. And my Butterworth is rather good. He has lots of little gems. And my brother was kind of debate whether he'd go on a board of a condominium. And Butterworth, you can say, well, what's in this for me? That's probably the way he operates most of the time. What's in this for me? Butterworth turn around and say, no, what's in it from me? Another very interesting take on it. You're contributing or you're trying to get something for you. And I often think that a lot of times we have, in this world, we have givers and takers. I think that's still true. And I was reading a book lately about sort of the illuminators. There's people that illuminate your way or show you a path. I think every one of us here in our lives has probably had somebody that's kind of shown the path for us, given us a suggestion and steered us the right way. So those are what I call the givers. But there's also people in this world that are kind of the diminishers. That they'll find that they like to diminish others for whatever reason, maybe to feel better about themselves or something like this. And this latest book that I read on this kind of topic says, ask questions. Ask questions about people. If you really want to get things, know where a person's at, simply ask them to ask questions about how they're doing or whatever. And Brooks wrote a book along this line. And so I thought that's kind of interesting too. And like books, there's a book I have, it's called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about reading. He says one of the habits is read. Sharpen the saw, he says. If you can read at least a book a month. I had a high school teacher who used to say, if you're going to get your grade 12, you guys got to read a book a week. But this Covey guy says, well, no, start with 1 month and seeing if you can get to one a week. Of course, that means turning a television off. And we often have a choice between television and so I opt for reading consistently. I'm reading a book right now on military history of all darn things. So I think I'm sort of I think with Covey on that 100%. Sharpen the saw with reading. Be it 1 book a month. And another guy I used to get a kick out of, his name is Charles Tremendous Jones. This is not Unity. He has a little wee book, it's called Life is Tremendous. And he would say, you're going to be the same 5 years from now as you are today, except for 2 things. The people you meet and the books you read. The people you meet and the books you read. So those illuminators in my life, in my work, I had 3 guys that are critical to my work. Here, 49 years later, I'm still working in climatology for agriculture. So anyway, those are the guys that are important in one's life, and I think we all probably have them. Freedom is probably my favorite word. And there's a little reading in Emotions Anonymous that basically says that only the disciplined are free. Most people say, forget that, but I believe it's true. I had an uncle who we thought was a free soul. He loved to, he'd come in our house and he'd just play the piano and he had a motorcycle, I think, and he was a plumber and all this. He smoked and he drank. And one would say, well, there's a guy that's free. He doesn't seem to care about anything, But he also died at age 56. But I actually think that the little writing that is in the Emotions Anonymous is correct. I think only the disciplined are really free. And I'm just going to read a few things out of the 12 steps. And I'll start with the slogans, because they're rather interesting. Let go and let God. We've all heard that one 1,000,000 times. You are not alone. I often say, If you're alone, for goodness sakes, go to Emotions Anonymous meeting. You know, there's all kinds of things. Aloneness is no fun at all. I'm saying I live in my own home by myself. Want to get out? That's one way to get out. So it's important that you are not alone. And easy does it. We've all heard that one. That's well known. Live and let live. That's the one that I often relate to, because so often people want to manage your life. I have a brother-in-law who wants to manage my life all the time. And I've got to the point where I avoid them. I don't visit them anymore. I used to be in Toastmasters. I stopped Toastmasters because I felt they were too controlling. And you know, if people start to control me, I usually say goodbye. You know, I won't go for it anymore. And so live and let live is a really important one. That's, if I've learned nothing else from Emotion Anonymous, it's that. Let people live their own lives, for goodness sakes. And so often it just doesn't happen. So it's you're either trying to control somebody. When you're trying to control somebody, you're not loving at all. That's a fact. So that's why I say that the people that the two kinds of people we go, the illuminators and the people that are kind of the diminishers. First things first, for time management, of course, look for the good. Most people, there's good in just about everybody. There's only 1%, there might be bad apples or whatever, you know. But look for the good is just about good in every circumstance when you think of it. So that's an important one. But for the grace of God, sometimes things just happen and you don't know why. Know thyself, be honest. That's a tough one. This too shall pass. 5 years of dialysis. Guess what? I got a kidney, 2006. It passed. And I need people. I think we're all sociable. I think human beings are sociable critters. They need people. So that's one of the slogans. Acceptance, awareness, action, attitude. I have a choice. So often we have choices that we don't realize. You know, we don't have to do certain things. We have a choice each and every time. Don't compare. I grew up with a gold medalist. My first cousin was a gold medalist in optometry. I competed with this guy for 18 years. It was no fun. Whatever you can do, I can do better kind of a routine. And it affected me. It really did, at university and so forth. Today's the first day and the rest of my life. So those are slogans. Here's a couple gems here that I think are rather good. And the just for today is, just for today, I will try to be happy, realizing my happiness does not depend on what others do or say or what happens around me. Happiness is a result of being at peace with myself. And I think it's not necessarily, they say, be happy. Well, I think it's your kind of your lifestyle that's really important, or you know, how you live. Just for today, I'll have a program. I may not follow it exactly, but I'll have it. I will save myself in two pests: hurry and indecision. Yes. Just for today, I will stop saying, if I had, I never will find time for everything. If I want time, I must take it. We don't have time or don't have time. We either take it or we don't, depending on how important it is in our lives. So those are just another couple little gems. And there's one here. Well, it's about the traditions. And the traditions is really the one that strikes me as most as important, as principles before personalities. Sometimes I've seen organizations where the principle gets so dominant that the principles go out the drain. So principles, I always figure, come first. And but I see that I'm kind of a person that likes to play it by the book, by the bylaws and so forth, because it's more, there's a reason for bylaws, that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm getting down towards the end here. And this is something I got out of a book, and it's rather good. In Unity, I learned that you don't need to say the word should. You could say could, right? And I read it in a bit about a guy who never used the word not. For some reason, they said this guy never used the word not. He had something about not using, it just wasn't in his vocabulary. And I pulled this out of a book I have by Waitley, The Words We Use. well, he talks, we can say I can't, which is the word that this guy would not use. Instead, I can. It's all about the words we use. I'll try. I will. You either do or you don't. You don't try, you either do or you don't. I kind of like that idea too. See. Someday I'll do this. Today I'll do this. But I had a supervisor that said, never use if, stay away from the if, ands, and buts. The buts, we know about the buts. And this guy here, he says, I understand. These are all just little word changes. Instead of difficult, challenging. Instead of stressed, motivated. Instead of worried, interested. Impossible, possible. And I, me, my, you, your. And hate and love, of course. So there's a little book, I think it's called, it's a little blue book, talks about complaints, living a complaint-free world. It kind of touches on this too. Okay. So freedom. I've had 2 talking doctors. The rest are all pill pushers. Talking doctors, you can't vote. They're far superior to pill pushers. That's the pill pushers ruin my kidney. But my favorite one, I guess, not the best one, but one of my favorites. I asked him one time what his favorite saying was, and he said, "The price of freedom is eternal vigilance." And I think that relates to Unity's standing porter at the door of thought, like keep the certain thoughts that serve you and certain that don't. So, and vigilance applies to all kinds of things, but as a personal vigilance too that we need, our self-talk, and so forth. So, the words we use, no ifs, ands, or buts. But I think I've mentioned my favorite guy. Life is tremendous. You're going to be the same. Books change people. Who you meet in life and everything. That's where people change. And so, I'm getting near the end. The first self-help book I ever read was Guide to Rational Living in an Irrational World by Albert Ellis. And it was really all about self-talk, the ABCs of what our thoughts are. And that's kind of another thing altogether. It's easy to say, difficult to do. And his thesis was man can live the most self-fulfilling, creative, and emotionally satisfying life by intelligently organizing and disciplining his or her thinking. And that's a big order. And we had the young fellow that's not here spoke on presence. And I think if you can't discipline your darn thoughts, you can at least circumscribe the present and live in the here and now. And that's a very powerful concept too. And just living, I passed exams by just concentrating on the here and now and not worrying about whether I failed or whatever. Just kept cool and wrote the darn thing. And so those are some of the things I guess I've gleaned. Albert Ellis used to talk about aliveness. This is a month of zeal, right? Aliveness is so important. Some people are more alive than others. You ever notice that? And those are the ones, and I think music brings it out of people too. I play in several bands, and there's an aliveness that comes in playing and participating in music. And okay, I think I've just about said all I wanted to say. Price of freedom is eternal vigilance. I thought it was such a good thought, I put it on my tombstone. I have a tombstone. It's on east of the Greenwood Cemetery in Carmen. I put it right beside my great-great-grandfather. And so that's what I put on. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. It is a good saying. And with that, there you have it, some highlights of 40 years of Emotions Anonymous and Unity.